South Korea, we were talking about this a couple of seconds ago. Nothing has happened there. It's been, like in limbo for the last 6 months. Their to-do list, or the to-do list for Lee Jae-myung, the new president, is longer than my arm.
It's a very long to-do list. I mean, for 6 months now, Korea, they've done a couple of stimulus packages to help the economy in the short run. But this is a period of time that Korea could have used to raise its economic game, to increase competitiveness, to empower women, to increase productivity. And none of these things happen. And 6 months is a long time in terms of economic policy. This is also probably the worst imaginable moment to have a political vacuum like this. You have the trade war going on. You have the Trump 2.0 headwinds coming from Washington, the policy chaos from Washington. And in many ways, you have China experiencing deflation. And this was a moment really when the Korean government needed to batten down the hatches, but also to step up reforms. Every year Korea tries to deal with, tries to negotiate with the MSCI index folks to get upgraded to developed market status. And every year these negotiations take place, and every year it gets very close. And MSCI says to Korea, almost, but not quite. Well, what Korea showed us in the last 6 months is why there is a Korea discount, right? There is a kind of chaoticness, if you will, in Seoul politics. Over the last 6 months, we've seen that writ large. And the question is, what does President Lee do in terms of priorities? I worry that he'll focus a lot on stimulating growth in the short run, that he won't focus enough on taking on these family-run conglomerates that tower over the economy, the chaebol. I worry that he won't do enough to level playing fields, to strengthen Korea's capital markets. There's a lot that he needs to be doing right out of the gate, hitting the ground running. And I worry that he'll focus more on boosting GDP in the short run than retooling in the long run. I hope I'm wrong about that, but I haven't heard a lot from him that sounds new, interesting, or bold.
Yeah, I mean, getting growth going again would necessarily be a top priority for him, right? And he's facing many of the similar pressures same pressures that Ishiba is facing, 24 on steel aluminum, 25 on autos. It seems to me that South Korea's trump card, and it always has been, right, is its ability, or at least capacity, to aid and abet the U.S. in terms of getting shipbuilding going again. Because, I mean, Japan, yeah, they can probably help, but at scale, it really is only South Korea who can help the U.S. And do you think, Lee Jae-myung, it would be wise to use that as leverage in negotiations?
Absolutely. And it's something that Trump administration officials have talked about to some extent. But I think one of the bigger issues for Korea is that, China, for all of its problems, has really sped up the economic clock in Asia. China, we think about the property crisis. We think about the aging population, and we think about a variety of challenges facing China. But the scale and the ways in which China has sped up the economic clock in Asia, it's forcing smaller economies to actually kind of also speed up their policymaking. And if you're South Korea, you're trying to compete in Asia. One of the problems is that a lot of what Korea is very good at is becoming commoditized thanks to China. Shipbuilding, car making, semiconductors. There's so many competitive advantages that Korea had 5 or 10 years ago that are being eaten away at by China's rise. And this is really a moment where Korea needs to be retooling its economy and improving itself. Korea is very good in a crisis. Korea is not as good at doing proactive policymaking to raise its economic game when the sun is out, if you will. It's very good when there's a storm and it's raining and there's a crisis. Korea is less skilled. Governments in Korea tend to be less skilled in terms of raising their economic game when things are calm. And I just worry about what the kinds of noises we're hearing from Seoul, from the new Lee president, the new Lee administration. I'm not hearing a lot that gives me a great deal of hope that he will be upending the status quo.
Oh, dear. Oh, dear. Willie, when we think about South Korea, a treaty ally as a potential buffer against China, right, and how it can help the West, we've talked about how sort of stealthily, their arms makers have suddenly almost come out of nowhere, although they've been in existence for decades now, right? And they've been, seen as a good place to turn to because they're one of the few arms makers that can supply NATO standard equipment. So it's good for Europe and good for the U.S. As well. The other way that they could potentially help, though, is down in the South China Sea. And, there's been efforts at three-way or trilateral cooperation between South Korea, Japan, and the U.S. for quite some time. It hasn't quite played out as well as it could, and it's simply because, the U.S., I think, views South Korea as sort of a single-issue country, security-wise, right? It's North Korea, and it's North Korea, and it's North Korea. And most of their attention is sort of land-focused as well, as opposed to sea or air-focused.
Right.
Do you get a sense that is starting to change, or just out of necessity? I mean, that their focus is still going to have to be land-based and very much towards North Korea.
Well, you have seen Japan and South Korea over the last several months cooperating more than I would have expected. And I think, the Trump shock, if you will, has been as such that, Seoul and Tokyo have decided that we need to talk more. And certainly China's been pulled into the mix to some extent. Donald Trump, as we all know, is he's not a multilateral guy. He's a bilateral individual, and he likes to focus on Japan, China, South Korea differently. And I think, from Trump's standpoint, the more that Japan and South Korea appear to work together on any level would run afoul of him. And I think in many ways you'll see also that I've loved the kind of détente we've seen over the last few years between South Korea and Japan, and a lot of this happened when Joe Biden was president. I would have felt a lot better about it if the leaders of Japan and South Korea were more popular. They had stronger mandates, and that's where we are at the moment. Prime Minister Ishiba doesn't have a lot of political capital, if you will, to spend to take out, to basically take around the world and do something with. And President Lee, I think he'll be so focused on domestic challenges for the next 3, 6, 12 months. It might be difficult for him to do anything geopolitically in the region. So I think it's an open question.
Yeah, they actually end up working in Trump's favor, right? Because, one of the strategies, the strategy he seems to prefer is sort of divide and conquer.